The Gray Mile. A story that'll always drive me insane as I rattle my brain to solve. You can smell the jurisdictional rot out here. It smells like wet pine needles, diesel fumes, and ozone. They call this place the Hollow, a dip in the geography where Route 71 sags heavy between the shoulders of Arkansas and Missouri. It's a place where the radio dial dies, caught in the static between a preacher screaming in Little Rock and a jazz station fading out of Joplin. I've been sitting in my 1951 Ford Custom for 6 hours now. The wipers are fighting a losing battle against a rain that feels less like weather and more like a judgment. The glass is fogged, but I wiped a circle clean so I can see the bench. It's just a bench. Wood slats, peeling green paint, bolted to a concrete slab that's slowly cracking apart under the pressure of tree roots. Above it, a corrugated metal roof drums in the rain. A single sodium light flickers overhead, buzzing like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. To the north, the Missouri State Highway Patrol claims the line starts at the culvert. To the south, the Arkansas State Police say the line is the old oak tree 10 yards back. That leaves the bench in no man's land, a gray mile. If you get stabbed on that bench, the cops will argue over who has to pay for the chalk outline while the rain washes the evidence into the ditch. I'm not looking for a body, though. I'm looking for ghosts, 2 of them, Thomas, James. It's been 5 years, 4 months, and 2 days. I don't need a calendar to know that. I feel the time in my joints. I feel it in the phantom weight of the badge I don't carry anymore. I reach into the glove box, past the rusted flashlight and the spare fuses, and pull out the bottle of rye. It's cheap stuff, burns going down, but it keeps the cold out. I take a pull, wincing, and look back at the bench. In my head, it's always sunny. It's always July 12th, 1954. The heat is shimmering off the asphalt, making the road look like a river of mercury. I see Martha standing on the porch, wiping her hands on her floral apron. She's smiling, but she looks tired. See, we were happy then mostly. We didn't know how fragile happy was. "Make sure they behave, Si," she'd said. "They're boys, Martha. They'll be fine." I drove them to the station in Fort Smith. Thomas was 8, trying to look bored, trying to be a man. James was 6, vibrating with energy, clutching that silver cap gun I'd bought him at the 5 and dime. It had a pearl handle and made a sharp pop that made him giggle every time. "You watch your brother," I told Thomas as they climbed the steps of the Greyhound. The driver, a solid man named Miller with a face like cured leather, nodded at me. "I'll keep an eye on 'em, Sergeant Vance," Miller said. "Put 'em off right at the turnaround for the blue line." I watched them find their seats. James waved the gun at me through the glass. Pop, pop. I waved back. I drove home. I fixed the screen door. I ate dinner. And then the phone rang. The panic didn't hit all at once. It leaked in, slow and cold. My mother-in-law and Neosho called at 6 p.m. "Silas? The boys, did they miss the bus?" "No, John. Put them on the 10 a.m. express. They should have been there by 4. "The blue line came and went, Silas. Driver said he didn't have any transfers." I drove to the turnaround that night. I did 80 miles an hour on back roads, sirens wailing, back when I had a siren. When I got there, the turnaround was empty, just the moths beating themselves to death against the sodium light. No boys, no struggle, no blood. Miller, the Greyhound driver, was distraught when I tracked him down. "I put him off, Silas. I swear on my mother's eyes. 2 p.m. They sat right there on that bench. The little one was holding the big one's hand. And the blue line, scheduled for 2:15, 15-minute layover, standard transfer. Perkins, the blue line driver, was a kid, scared stiff. "I got there at 2:15, sir, on the dot. I slowed down, looked at the bench, empty. I figured maybe they missed the connection or got picked up by family. 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, 2 boys vanished from the face of the earth on the side of a highway, and nobody saw a thing. Then came the bureaucracy. That was worse than the silence. I went to the Sebastian County Sheriff. Not our jurisdiction, Silas. That bench is technically in McDonald County, Missouri. I drove to Pineville. The Missouri sheriff, a man named Caldwell with eyes like flat stones, leaned back in his chair. Arkansas plates, Arkansas residents, dropped off by an Arkansas bus. Sounds like an Arkansas problem, Sergeant. They batted the case back and forth like a shuttlecock. Runaways, they said. Wandered into the woods, they said. Sinkholes, they said. The limestone out here is Swiss cheese. Probably fell in a cave. They dragged the woods for 3 days. Dogs, volunteers, helicopters. Nothing. Not a shoe. Not a scrap of clothing. Not a toy gun. Martha died 2 years later. They called it pneumonia, but that's polite talk. She died of a broken heart. She just stopped getting out of bed, stopped eating. She faded away until she was transparent, and then she was gone. And I was left alone in a house full of silence and toys that gathered dust. I turned in my badge the day after her funeral. I couldn't arrest drunk drivers or solve petty thefts anymore, not when the only case that mattered was sitting in a file box marked inactive in 2 different state capitals. I moved into the motor inn 6 months ago. The manager, Cal, gives me a rate. He knows I keep the riffraff out. My room is a shrine to the missing. I taped a map of the tri-state area to the wall. It's covered in red string and pushpins looking like a bloody spider web. I stopped listening to the cops. They're useless, bound by rules, by budgets, by borders. I followed the logic. If they didn't walk into the woods and they weren't picked up by the blue line, they were taken. But by who? A random drifter? A pervert passing through? Possible, but unlikely to be so clean. No tire squeals, no screams heard by the farmhouse half a mile down the road. It was too efficient. I started going to the libraries. Joplin, Bentonville, Fayetteville. I pulled microfiche reels until my eyes burned. I wasn't looking for my boys anymore. I was looking for the others. You don't find them in the police blotters. You find them in the back pages of the local gazettes. Small paragraphs buried under the farm reports. Teenager missing after bus trip. Grandmother fails to arrive in Texarkana. Drifters vanish near state line. I compiled a list. 1951. Sarah Jenkins, 19. 1952. The Gable brothers, 22 and 24. 1953. Hattie Miller, 68. 1954. Thomas and James, 7 people, 4 years, all of them travelers, all of them transfers, and all of them vanished at the state line turnaround. But there was something else. A variable I hadn't seen until I laid the dates out on the floor of my motel room and drank half a bottle of bourbon. The dates were random, July, October, March. But the mechanics were identical. I went to the Transit Authority archives in Joplin. I had to bribe a clerk named Mrs. Higgins with a box of chocolates and a lie about writing a book on highway history. She let me into the basement. I pulled the maintenance logs for the Blue Line connector service. I ran my finger down the ledger, dust coating my skin. July 12th, 1954. The day my boys died. Vehicle 404, out of service. Radiator overheat. 11 a.m. Dispatch note, relief vehicle requested. My heart hammered against my ribs. I checked October 4th, 1951, Sarah Jenkins. Vehicle 309, out of service, flat tire, dual rear, 1 p.m. Dispatch note, relief vehicle requested. Every single time a person vanished, the regular Blue Line bus had broken down hours before, a mechanical failure, a call to dispatch, a relief vehicle sent. But Perkins, the driver on July 12th, had been driving the Blue Line bus. He said he arrived at 2:15. So if the bus was broken, how did Perkins get there? They fixed it, Mrs. Higgins said when I asked her, peering over her glasses. Or they swapped it out at the depot. But sometimes if the fleet is stretched thin, they use a contractor. A contractor? Independent garages, tow services. They have charter permits. We call them when we're in a pinch. They run the route until our mechanic gets the main bus running. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. Who? I asked. Who was the contractor on July 12th, 1954? She flipped through a different binder, a vendor payment log. Here it is, paid out to Red's Auto and Salvage for emergency transit services. Red's Auto. I knew the place. It was a junkyard about 10 miles east of the turnaround deep in McDonald County, a place where stolen cars went to get chopped and where the local sheriff liked to drink coffee on Tuesday mornings. I needed confirmation. I tracked down the dispatcher from 1954, a man named Henderson. He was living in a trailer on the edge of Bull Shoals Lake, coughing up his lungs from 40 years of unfiltered Camels. I didn't bring a badge. I brought a bottle of whiskey and the picture of Thomas and James. We sat on his porch, listening to the crickets. I remember that day, Henderson wheezed, staring at the photo. Sad business, terrible business. You called Red's Auto, I said. It wasn't a question. I had to. The radiator on the 404 blew. We were short-handed. Red had a bus, an old International. He did charter work for the church sometimes. Did he pick them up? He was supposed to, Henderson said, taking a long pull from the bottle. But then Perkins got the 404 running again, just a loose hose clamp. Perkins radioed in, said he was back en route. He hit the turnaround at 2:15 like he was supposed to. So Red's bus wasn't needed. Right. I called Red to cancel. He said his driver was already out there, but he'd radio him to turn back. I leaned in, the wicker chair creaking. What time did you call Red to cancel? About 2:10 p.m. The math clicked into place like a loaded chamber. If Red's driver was already there, if he arrived before 2:15, if he arrived at 2, right as the Greyhound pulled away. The boys wouldn't know the difference. They were expecting a bus. A bus showed up. A man in a uniform opened the door. Neo show, hop in, boys. By the time Perkins arrived at 2:15 in the real bus, the phantom bus was 15 minutes gone. What did the bus look like, Henderson? I asked. Generic, he said. No livery, just gray, primer gray. That was 3 days ago. Now, sitting here in the rain, watching the turnaround, I know what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a mistake. I'm looking for a schedule that runs parallel to the real one, a schedule that preys on the gaps, a breakdown, a confusion, a gray bus sliding into the slot like a parasite. Yesterday, when the rain let up for an hour, I walked into the woods. The sheriff said they searched everywhere, but the sheriff is a liar or an idiot or both. I walked past the jurisdiction line. I walked past the search grid. I went down an old logging road that cuts off Route 71 about a quarter mile south of the bench. It's overgrown with kudzu and brambles, invisible from the highway unless you know it's there. I hacked my way through with a machete. The mud there is deep, clay-heavy. It holds memories. And there, hardened into the earth from years of repetition, were tracks, not car tracks, too wide, dual rear axles. The ruts were deep, heavy vehicle. I followed them for a mile until I hit a chain-link fence marked Private Property, Red's Salvage. I stood at that fence line. Through the trees I could see the glow of a welding torch in a large corrugated barn. I saw a shape parked in the shadows, boxy, long. It looked like a bus. I didn't go in, not yet. I had a snub-nosed .38 in my ankle holster, but I knew that wouldn't be enough. If my theory was right, if 7 people, if my sons, had been taken by these men, then this wasn't just a kidnapping. This was an industry. I walked back to my car in the dark. I drove back to the motel. I cleaned my gun. I bought a box of hollow points. And I started writing this journal because tonight the forecast calls for a storm, a heavy one, the kind that drowns out noise, the kind that washes away footprints. Tonight, I'm not going to the turnaround. Tonight, I'm going to the salvage yard. I'm going to find the gray bus, and God help anyone who stands between me and the truth.